Hello everyone, welcome to my review of the AT-AP Walker. This is set 75234 with 689 pieces, and for a retail price of $70, I think that's a pretty good piece count. You do get yourself Chewbacca, a Kashyyyk clone trooper, and also Clone Commander Gree, which is pretty nice, as well as two Kashyyyk battle droids, which are the green colored ones. So overall, you get yourself a pretty nice loadout of minifigures, as well as a nice AT-AP. Now, I do think that this is one of the more forgotten sets, just because, well, most people are more interested in the ATTE, and I feel like the ATST is more iconic than the AT-AP. Still, this is a nice set, and I think you do get a nice selection of minifigures to boot. So, let's look at the back, which gives us a nicer look at the main turret, which does have a swivel action, and also a spring-loaded shooter, as well as the control panel, which in my case is actually upside down, and also the two-legged versus three-legged formation mode, which is pretty nice. So let's jump into the minifigs. First up is Chewbacca, who doesn't really change throughout LEGO forms. However, he does have himself a silver crossbow instead of the stud shooter bowcaster, which is pretty interesting. He does have a little bit of lighter fuzz on his legs because the majority of him does have the brown fur. However, he does have himself a utility belt over on his main torso area, moving into a transition of a kind of oval-shaped light fur around his head there, with his mouth kind of being a little bit more darker, with his eyes kind of be there. The underneath doesn't have any detail as it's just brown, but the back does have that weapon belt and some more flowing brown fur. Our regular Kashyyyk clone trooper does look very good, having a lot of camo both on the torso and the legs being majority brown with a little bit of splotches of that camo pattern, with the main torso being more of a dark olive with camo spread about with a bunch of his armor, but also a little bit of a utility pack around his stomach. Now, he does have an interesting scout trooper style headgear here with the oxygen tank, but also some very green goggles there for his eye sockets. He does also have the little bit of like the cone that goes in front of him, so he does have a little bit of eye protection from the sun, which is pretty interesting. The back of him does look a lot like a scout trooper because he does have that little backpack indent that you'd find on a scout trooper, as well as some survival pouches attached to his back. Now his head, interesting enough, does have a little bit of side detailing as well with some more camo, if I could get it positioned probably, but also it has a little bit of a pocket there on the side if you can see it, which is pretty interesting. So a lot of detail put into this one minifigure. Except for the head, which is just a regular angry clone face, but everything else about this minifigure does make up for it. Commander Gree is an absolutely fantastic figure to see here. He does have black legs with a lighter tan green colored camo on him, which does transition a little bit differently when you approach his main battle armor, because his main battle armor does introduce a lot more of the darker greens, with a little bit more of black woven in there from his tool belt to then going up onto his side armor there, which is these interesting little rods on either side, but it has almost oil spills there for his main torso. His arms are just full green, but his helmet there does have a main stripe which converges into two when you get his main little crest there in silver. Now, the interesting part is that I didn't know about is those holes there that you see, which look like breakups in paint, are actually intentional on the figure because they do have a little bit of battle damage on their thing, but also their T-shaped visor there is in green, and from the glare on my end, it does look a little bit more mixed in with the dark green, but on the camera lens, it looks a little bit better. The back of his head does just have a standard silver, but he has a lot more utility packs on the back of his torso because there's just a lot more pockets and a lot more utility, and unlike the other Kashyyyk trooper, which had a bit of a backpack, he has a little bit of a square backpack edge, or more so just an armor plating rather than a backpack, which is pretty interesting. Underneath his head, though, or helmet I should say, he does have himself an angry clone face, which is a bit unfortunate. But we've got two more minifigures to go. Now, these last two are just regular Kashyyyk battle droids, which means that they do have this dark olive coloring torso, as well as a nose that's green and like a top of their head, which is that olive coloring. Now, the interesting bit here is on the box, it shows them having black blasters, but they indeed have like a darker, more grayish blaster coloring. I would take out the blasters, but I'm pretty sure most people have seen these standard type blasters before, so I don't think it's much mentoring. But they do have a little bit of a stud on the back, so you can place their weapon down there, and you can kind of fold them up if you need to, having them in a more deployment position like such, if you choose to do so. It is a little bit better to have them in the deployment system if you have a stud, because that way they kind of stay in that position. But regardless, they're just battle droids, nothing too special. But that concludes our minifigures. Now, I think the interesting part about this build is that it's actually a lot larger than many people might think, because it is a walker, but throwing in that extra $20 does actually do a lot for it, because for one, it has a lot larger back legs here than you might expect from a normal ATST. It does use a little bit of a different technique than you might see from an ATST, but it is definitely a lot sturdier. So it definitely has a little bit more kind of strength, even though it pushes more towards the front with its weight, in a sense, because it is hanging a lot over with it. But it does have that third leg for support, which you can access by just simply moving the switch that's in the back, which, as you can see, loosens the front leg, and then you kind of push it out a little bit, grabbing it from underneath, and then pulling it a little bit forward until you can get it positioned onto the ground, and then it's a little bit more stable to kind of just stand on and have a little bit more position. You can move this little blaster around. It's a little bit like more of a quick fire turret, whereas on the top you have a bit more of a sentry overlook turret, which can spin all the way around. If you don't mind too much, you do have to move over this little clip, which I'll explain a little bit later, but you also have this main turret, which does also function and give it the up and down movement. The only unfortunate thing is that it can't go further up, so if you have a little bit more of a long range target, you are going to have a little bit more difficulty, but it is still a nice turret nonetheless. You can see this clip here, and that's how you kind of lock everything in place so that this turret no longer swivels. Now, if I did have a spring-loaded shooter missile, you would normally put it here, and then you'd press down right here because it would stick out over where the control panel is to fire it out aggressively at your nearest target. Now, it does have a little bit of interior space. You can access it through two ways, either opening one of these side panels that are located on either side of the vehicle, or you can simply just lift up this entire segment and move it right here. As you can see, this gives you access to the full interior, where you've got two chairs and some control panels to match, with this main little drone here, which is the droid gunship or separatist gunship, giving you the ability to track it down and fire it from wherever you might need to. Now, the main detailing on the outside is this Republic logo, along with a mixture of dark gray, light gray, and also this olive green coloring. It isn't too crazy detailed, seeing as how it's mainly supposed to be big and intimidating, rather than have a full focus on details, but the bottom doesn't have too much to show for it. As you probably expected, the bottom of these do have studs, so you can still place it down and have it standing in place, but it does have another feature as to the fact that you can physically, like you might expect, raise these up and have it standing so that it can fire further up than it is in its current position. It can stay pretty stable on the higher elevation levels, where if you tilt it back, however, both of them have to be in the same position, and you want to make sure that this leg is extended in the proper position. So mostly if you're trying to go back, you want to have it extended inward, and also have the little Technic joints that exist there in the proper position so that it doesn't fall forward and have too much weight in the front. But outside of that, it's a very nice AT-AP here design. It definitely has a lot of versatility. I think many people will definitely consider the ATT that just came out a lot better, just because it's an ATT and it's more iconic of sorts, but this is still a nice build and there for anybody that wants it. It isn't currently available, but it's still a nice set nonetheless, so I hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye.